Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk. Hi.
G'day.
I wonder what the greeting is in South Africa, since I'm doing something South African. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's hi.
Hello is the standard by which everything else will be measured. So speaking of the smell of death.
Wow.
Have you been... I've been sitting on this for minutes. I don't know if you've been following the local news lately.
Nope.
There's a Colorado Springs funeral home that's in some trouble.
Oh, no. Look at that. We've done it now.
They've... before I jump into this, it just broke yesterday, I think. I don't have all the details, and I mean absolutely no disrespect to anybody who used this service.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, I understand.
Wasn't Swan Law, was it?
No. I can't remember the name of it. I recognize the name of it. It hasn't been around as long as Swan Law. But there was a building. They have a building. Was it down in Penrose? It was a rural building. And the neighbors started reporting a smell. There remains of at least 110 or 115 improperly stored. And
why do they keep doing this shit?
They have been operating without a license for a year. And I just was like, oh my God, this is like something we talk about on the show all the time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, it just sounds awful. And I don't know what, it wasn't clear. I mean, they raided the place. Because a neighbor was like, you'd get a smell and you'd think maybe it was roadkill, but then it just would not go away. And at one point, one of the owners tried to say it was wood burning. I'm like, no, that does not smell
That's
like...
a very different smell than death.
And then he tried to claim he was doing taxidermy in the building. And that was what the smell was. So that's, yay! Truth is stranger than fiction.
No. They always eventually fuck up like this and get caught. And it's like, why do you keep doing it?
And it's like, it's that 6-year-old mindset. If I just don't look at it, nobody else will be able to tell it's there.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we don't call any attention to it, nobody will see it. Don't pay no attention to the men behind the curtain.
Oh, Lord. No, I'm done with these funeral homes doing this bullshit.
Yes.
But, yeah, so the smell of death came up because we were sitting down to dinner, and all of a sudden a cat runs in with a mouse.
Now, it was one of your cats.
Yes. It was Nefertiti, the Siamese. So, yeah, actually, we're sitting there, and the way our stairs come down, they turn, so there's this kind of platform at about head level is where that platform is. And that is where she brought it down. She likes to take her mice up to my son.
Okay.
He does not like it. He does not appreciate it. We have had to trap mice in his room, and when Savannah was up there, her room, because Neffy takes him upstairs to the bedroom level because she's a dick. So anyway, we're sitting there, and then we're like, why is Neffy acting like this? Because, she's doing some hunter-stalker thing there on that platform, right behind where my daughter sits, right where her head is. And I was like, there's a mouse. That's mouse behavior. And all of a sudden, the mouse shoots over that platform and down over it to us. And we're like, oh, shit! So then we're all up. Here's the dinner. It was a nice dinner, too. Like, I worked hard on that dinner. It was a real food dinner. And nope. Here we are. We're trying to find boxes. And my husband had just broken down, like, all the boxes and stuff in the house. And put them in the recycle, and it had gone. So, here we are. Instead of eating, we're trying to chase this poor little thing. I always hate it because I'm like, I know we're terrifying it, but we're trying to save you from the cat. So, yeah, we're trying to get it, and it is so fucking fast. And I swear to you, it could flatten to the size of a paper because it got past us multiple times. So then it runs into my office, and I was just like, no, because my office was such a mess. There was stuff all over the floor. There was stuff everywhere. We've now moved stuff that I needed to move up into what's going to be the guest bedroom and kind of storage. Because we finally just came in. We moved everything out that was sitting on the floor. pulled the shelf out, pulled the desk out.
And this is a big desk.
Yeah, this was not fun. And it was behind here for a while. And we got this close to catching it. Just so close. Now, and then it wasn't behind the desk anymore.
Were you waving a broom at any point?
No.
Traditionally, you need to be waving a broom to catch mouse. It also helps if you say, eek a mouse.
I have shot a mouse out of the back door with a broom in the past, like a hockey puck, just because they're so fast.
I love it.
That you can't. And at that point, that was the one where it was just me and everybody else was in bed. This was years ago. And we only had the one cat, I think. We only had Cleo, so really years ago. And I was sitting there on the sofa just watching TV, and I saw the corner of my eye, something dark dart underneath me.
Yep.
And I was like, what the fuck? Got up, and that was when Cleo's there trying to catch it, and I'm flipping the sofa back and forth. Flip it forward, mouse darts under. And I'm cussing a blue streak because it really annoys me how much I shriek profanity. Like, it freaks me. There's something primal in the back of my head that cannot handle a mouse dashing at me. I think it's because they're so fucking fast and they're just coming at you. So then, this is happening. And I'm going back and forth. And I finally just went and got the broom because Cleo can't catch a mouse, actually, to save her life.
Wow.
We locked her in a cabinet with a mouse once. Heard all this racket, opened it up. They're lying next to each other panting.
Did the mouse ask
because they
for
did like
cigarette?
a full Tom and Jerry chase inside that cabinet, but she could not actually take out the mouse. So boop, hockey puck right outside. I was like, I'm sorry, but you have to get out, and you're gonna get hurt worse if I don't get you the fuck out right now. So we closed my office that night because we couldn't find it anymore after it disappeared from here.
Mm-hmm.
It was very confusing because I was over here. I had it blocked, and I had everything blocked, and it still got through the blockades. And it was all the way across the room behind a bookshelf. So we found it dead on the second shelf of my bookshelf. Yes. So that is why the scent of death came up, because then the next day I had to come in here, and then I was like, yep, that's a whiff of death I have there.
That's something you don't want to smell anywhere in your house.
But we even taped the bottom of the French door so that it would be in here. And we did you see there's traps now because it's fall and it's getting cold, and that's when the mice get in, and that's when the cats play with the mice.
Yes.
So they're live catch though, so we can put them outside if we can only get them to go in the trap.
So
I hate mouse season.
So have you ever noticed that in different situations, when you're startled or surprised and you yell an invective or a cuss, you never know what's going to come out of your mouth?
Yeah.
So listeners might realize I had a trip to South Carolina, moving thing too. So there are many, many stories that will trickle out. So we get to the house, and Nikki's not there yet. So Dave, Nikki's young man, and I don't know what to call him, her partner, and friend Dan are unloading, and I are unloading the truck. So what was I didn't determine this. I don't know how to do anything in a practical fashion. I can get shit done. It's not always the best way. So I was taking stuff to the edge of the truck, the big moving truck, and then they were coming and grabbing the stuff and carrying it either up the stairs or down the stairs into the house. No problem. I'm moving Nikki's suitcases, and I get a bunch of them moved over to the edge, and one of the big ones hits a little yellow rolly suitcase. And it starts to roll down the ramp. And I yell a quote from a Cheech and Chong movie. Out the top of my lungs, I yelled, "Goddamn Finkelstein shit kid, son of a bitch."
Wow.
I don't know where that came from. And I will say, all props, Dave and Dan tore ass out of the house when I started yelling. That friggin' suitcase rolled down the ramp and just stopped at the bottom, completely upright. And because it was bright yellow, it was hilarious. It was like a minion rolling down. So you and I have traveled together a lot, and you do, I think, learn a lot about people when you travel with them. So, and takes 4 days to drive a U-Haul with dodgy AC. So it runs for 15 to 20 minutes and then it stops for an hour.
Oh.
And it was during that hot spell.
Through the South.
Yeah. It's fun. So, where'd we stop? Our first night, we stopped somewhere in Kansas. So the next morning, get up, we all meet. The three of us meet downstairs for breakfast. And Dan is singing. He's that cheerful.
Oh.
He's singing. And I looked at Nikki, and she looked at me, and I was like, we're screwed. Cheerful. Dawn till dusk, as far as I can tell. That man is never not cheerful. He says hello to everyone. He smiles at everyone. He just is.
That's nice, because he's my age, and I definitely did not make it this far without being severely jaded.
I think he has that piece, but his demeanor is just always positive, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, it's like traveling with a unicorn.
Wow.
Right? But
yeah, no, I don't think I could travel with somebody super cheerful. Like,
but it was fun. He was just, and he put up with a lot.
I'm sure.
Because when I sat in the truck with, of course, okay, now I know Dan really well, but before this, I did not. So what do you do when you're in a truck with someone you don't know? So, how do you come to be in Colorado Springs? I just asked him about his life and his family, and it wasn't like he was like, ew, stop talking to me. He knows how to converse. He asked me about myself. So, yeah, we talked about a lot of different stuff.
That's good.
So, it was that
At least it wasn't somebody mute.
And he also was like, well, I brought my headphones so I can listen to books. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that was a visual reaction. I get very excited when I meet people who read, because so many people, I mean, we hang out with writers who all should read. So meeting someone in the wild who reads, and I was like, what do you read? And he was like, well, he just finished listening to some podcast. And I was like, okay. And I said, well, what are you listening to now? And he goes, I found this. It's these stories, and they're 20 to 40 minutes long. And I said, well, where do they come from? Clark's World. I said, excuse me. You're listening to Clark's World magazine? Clark's World, Neil Clark. Nobody can get into the fucking magazine because it's so high quality. Clark's World?
Yeah.
And he goes, yes. Yeah. He's like, why do you seem to be having a seizure? So,
yeah, that's surprising. Like somebody listening to one of the magazines. It's awesome though, because the magazines are all going to go under if nobody's actually.
Yeah, they are
reading, listening.
Thanks,
to
Amazon.
Them. Yeah, Amazon screwed him over big time.
Yeah, it bent him over and didn't even buy him dinner.
And I don't even. It's periodicals. Basically, you can't do anything like that periodical style. And so I'm like, that's okay. I guess buy to that money. They took over. Amazon bought out CreateSpace, which is where people were self-publishing before, right? Ages ago. And they've never made it so that you can do a pre-order for a paperback on Amazon. Like there's all these little ways, like you're doing all this other shit. Mm-hmm. You bought a platform that already did pre-orders to your platform, and yet when you bought it, suddenly it couldn't happen anymore. And I don't understand. Bizarre. So like you get up when you have a new release, you need to get bumped up in the algorithms, and so the pre-orders do that, and then on the day that it launches, all those orders count, right? All those pre-orders count as orders that day, and then that's how people get like the new release for number one new release and shit, right? Yes. And so yeah, like they've really screwed authors over with their ability to do much of anything with that. You can pre-order ebooks on there, but I'm like, okay. So yeah, they just make some really weird, stupid decisions.
They do.
There's always stuff going down in the author community about Amazon. But a lot of us make all our money on Amazon instead of the other places. Mm-hmm. So kind of stuck with it.
Do you remember when we went to 20 Books to 50K and there was a guy who not only doesn't use Amazon, he publishes his own books and does he does everything, and he talked about that. He didn't just talk about doing it that way, but he did talk about doing that. I heard him speak again. Was it a podcast? Who knows how? But because I liked him and I liked a lot of what he had to say, I tuned in to listen to what he was saying, and he was like, he seems to have changed his tune a little bit.
Huh.
Not that he won't continue to do it, but he's like, yeah, this is really not for everybody. It's
not workable unless you have a staff, honestly, at some point.
And I don't know who he's got helping him, but he just seemed to have really dialed it back.
Interesting. This is the last year they're doing virtual, by the way.
Really?
Yep. I got because I paid for virtual this year. And he put out the thing, because it's being taken over by other people who are big speakers there. Like the person who's been running it this whole time is not going to be running it anymore. Michael Anderle? Yeah. I'm not part of the cult, so I don't know the details that much.
I haven't been following it, so I didn't know. So I wonder who's taking it over.
He did say, I did read it when he originally said it. I just didn't give a shit about who they were, and I didn't know who they were, so it didn't stick with me. So yes, it's supposed to stay, very much the same in other ways, but they're not going to be doing virtual.
And he's not going to be running it?
No, I think he's going to, show up and maybe do some workshops and stuff, but I don't think he's running it anymore.
He's been running it for a long time, and I know he had some health issues, so...
Yeah. So
I don't blame him and he lives in Alaska.
Yeah.
And I don't care what anybody says. I think Vegas is the worst place to have a conference.
Yeah, I don't. There's too much other stuff.
They're set up. Don't get me wrong. They have the setup there, and they can handle however many people you want to throw at them. But it's expensive, and it smells like cigarette smoke.
Yes, everywhere. Yeah, so, I don't know. But it is staying in Vegas. That's why I was one day, I would like to go to the Madrid one that they have.
Now that does look...
It's I can do that. Yeah. I can speak some Spanish.
I cannot. Yeah, I'm going to learn, though. You heard it here first. I know, I've said it before, but really, I am.
On that note, let's get started.
Yes, you're starting this time, right? Yes. Yeah. I'm going to make all my crinkly noises.
I'm going to tell you now, it's in South Africa, and I did listen to a podcast by a South African to get some of the pronunciations, but since they didn't say all of the names or anything, there's going to be ones that I'm probably going to butcher, because South Africa is just not a place I'm that familiar with. So, anyway, I'm doing the ABC Strangler. His name is Moses Sitole. Between January and April 1995, 4 bodies were found in Atteridgeville in South Africa. They were all young black women who had been strangled and it was thought raped. They'd also been beaten before the strangulation occurred. The body of a 2-year-old turned out to be the son of one of the female victims. He had received a head injury and been left to die of exposure.
Oh, God.
When his mom was taken. The women had apparently been lured to fields before being beaten, tied up, raped, and murdered by strangulation with their own panties. But how were they being lured in? And so I'm saying field, it's the veld in South Africa. It's the really tall grasses. So when I say field, we're not talking like a football field or something with short, very tall, like the blonde grasses that are up there. So the press caught on that there was a likely serial killer, because this was just bang, 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 and it was too similar. The 2-year-old set off a brief feeding frenzy that ultimately disappeared into the background after a while, as it does, because when it all boiled down to it, it's just a bunch of dead women again, right? And when is that not happening? July 17th, 1995, a man saw another man acting strangely. I wanted more information on this.
Yeah, what constitutes
with a woman
acting strangely?
Well, next time, how far away was he? Because...
Was he being polite? Was he...
By the time he got to the area to investigate, the woman was dead and the man long gone. And I'm like, what did you see? Were you watching him killing her? I don't... So, this woman had been killed in similar fashion to others, right? But I was like, what is the order of operations here? How far away were you to see that he was acting weird? And by acting weird, do you mean strangling her with her panties?
That would be weird.
And he hadn't been able to see the killer from where he was well enough to, like, have a description of him or anything.
Okay.
So, yeah, I was like, all right. As more bodies turned up, a task force was created within the Pretoria Murder and Robbery Unit. They noticed that the brutality was increasing, theorizing that the greater the suffering, the more pleasure the killer got out of it. With the women being identified for the most part, investigations revealed that many of them had mentioned they were going to meet with someone about an employment opportunity.
That would do it.
Yep. Especially then, the job market, not great. So if there was a job opening and you had a chance, you were going to go. The case really broke on September 16th, 1995, when the discovery of a woman's body at the Van Dyke mine near the town of Boksburg revealed a mass grave in which 10 bodies were located.
Ooh.
Various levels. It didn't take long for police to connect these murders with the Attridgeville murders. Nelson Mandela himself came out, alerted by the constant media attention, and pleaded for information that would lead to the killer. Robert Ressler, a famous FBI profiler, one of the original teachers in the first Profiling Academy class, somebody who, I don't know. I think our FBI profiler friend liked him better than John Douglas. John Douglas is the first one I found, but they were both insanely famous. So he actually came all the way out from America to South Africa to consult.
Wow.
And he said that the killer was organized and intelligent, that he had a high sex drive, and that his confidence was growing with each murder. He mentioned there might be a second killer. Luckily, police found someone who was able to give the name of the person the victim, Amelia Rapidile, was going to see about a job. His name was Moses Sitole. More victims showed that same link, but Sitole was in the wind. More bodies turned up, but police could not locate him. Moses Sitole was born November 17th, 1964, in a small town near Boksburg. His father died when he was 5 years old, and his mother was unable to care for the 5 children, so she had abandoned them at a police station. And she said, don't tell them my name. Like, don't tell them who I am.
Okay.
And you know what? Her kids listened. They didn't give her name. And he said after the fact, years later, that she was abusive, that she was an alcoholic, and all of this. They were put in an orphanage in KwaZulu-Natal, but faced abuse while there. It was very poorly run. It was not a good place for these kids to be. When he was a teenager, he escaped, tracking down his mom, who returned him to the orphanage.
Oh.
He escaped again later and moved in with his older brother. So this is after his older brother was out. He'd aged out. Eventually, he took work in a gold mine in Johannesburg. Bear in mind that he was a black youth during the era of apartheid. So this just a lot of bad situations here. Does not justify what he ultimately did. But
I imagine it would fuck your head up pretty hard to escape an orphanage, track down your mother, and she takes you back.
Yeah.
To the orphanage.
Yeah.
No.
It's messed up. So, yeah. He was known to have an aggressive sexual appetite, but was also known to be charming and quiet, having no shortage of willing girlfriends, though many people reported that any rejection from a woman set him into a rage. So the whole theory, of course, looking back, is because of his mother's actions, he hated women. He also implied at one point that a stepsister had sexually abused him. And I was like, when was he around a stepsister? Like, how long did the mother keep them? I could not, for the life of me, find good information on this. We really like to cover American serial killers, like in America, like on the web and stuff like that. I feel like they don't get the attention in other countries that we give to serial killers, which would be an interesting psychological thing to follow up on, yeah. Like, why are Americans so interested in serial killers compared to other folks? But a rape victim turned him in September 1987. Patricia Kumalo was 29 at the time. In 1989, another woman turned him in, Doris Swakamisa. Press charges and a conviction earned him 6 years in prison for rape. Of course, he got out in 1993 for good behavior. He didn't serve 6 years.
No.
Girlfriends and his rape victim said he talked of a previous girlfriend who had mistreated him, but he doesn't appear to have brought this up along with his other excuses to authorities or the press, so I don't know if that's just the thing he was telling them, if he was couching talk about his mother as in a ex-girlfriend, I don't know. He always maintained his innocence, stating he had never raped anyone and that the accusations had all been false. For the record, she had been tied up in a field and left there after he was done with her. So, again, in the veldt. And she had gotten herself free. And that doesn't sound like consensual sex to me. Now, being tied up in a veldt, perhaps. But leaving her there, no. He later said he should have killed her. In fact, he said it directly to her when they were together in the back of a police cruiser on the way to the police station after Doris spotted him and pointed him out to the police. It was a few weeks later, I think it said, and she was like, oh shit, there's my rapist. Got the police, took them to him, got him arrested. They put them both in the back of the cruiser together to drive to the police station. Throughout everything, he has maintained he wasn't a rapist. Like, we've talked about that whole thing before, but it's like, you absolutely were.
Yes, he was.
At some point, Patrick. At some point, it's because Patricia was right there. At some point, Moses opened a shell organization called Youth Against Human Abuse. It was supposed to save children from child abuse. So it all sounds great, but I don't know how much he was actually doing with that business. But that's how he lured in his female victims, contacting them for interviews. Yep. Whether it was through his business or not, it's reported that Sitole often helped children living on the street and that he did help get some runaways home to their loving families. So he did do some things, but that's not what the organization was supposed to be for. Right. So I think that's just shit he did. And then he went, I could start this business and I could get me some victims.
So even assholes can have redeeming moments.
Right. On October 3rd, 1995, another body was discovered and a phone call came into the Star, a newspaper, from a man who said he was the one responsible for the dead woman. In fact, he said he'd killed over 70 women on that phone call. He had information that hadn't been released to the public, so they did believe that this was the real killer. He agreed to meet with them, but didn't show up. Instead,
kill surprise.
I know. 3 more women turned up over the course of 10 days. So this guy was just... He was just mowing through women.
He says he's going to turn himself in, so I bet he will.
I bet. Let's wait and see.
Because he's just such a stand-up guy. Stands by his word.
So when he didn't show up, police released this information, what they had on him, to the media. With the public now on the lookout for a specific person, Sitole grew nervous. He tried to go to a family member for help, but undercover police were waiting for him. Then he tried to fend off police with a hatchet, which resulted in him being shot by police in the leg and stomach and taken into custody on October 18th, 1995.
Gotta love a hatchet.
At the hospital, he was found to be positive for both HIV and TB. Yeah. He admitted that he had killed a number of women, but also claimed there was a copycat killer duplicating his methods, which I think is funny because that's totally backpedaling on the I killed 70 women. On October 23rd, 1995, he was charged with 29 murders. The murders had started in Attridgeville, proceeded to Boxburg, and ended in Cleveland. Not Cleveland in America. Cleveland is in Johannesburg, which is why he was called the ABC Killer.
Okay.
In the lead up to his trial, police continued investigating, ultimately bringing the charges to 38 murder counts, 40 counts of rape, 6 cases of robbery. Jesus. So I'm assuming he stole something off of just 6 of the victims that they found on him, perhaps. Other than the toddler, Sitole's victims had ranged in age from 18 to 45. With as many victims, 9 of them unidentified to this day. I'm not going to read all their names. Also, fair. I would butcher them, and that would probably be far more offensive.
Yes.
But there is a list on Wikipedia, if anybody ever wanted to look that up. It has name, age, date of death, and on some of them when they were found, because some of them he just kind of gave their information. And I could not find, I don't think that means all of them were discovered, but I don't know. If they had, unless the unidentified ones weren't so much Jane Doe's as they never found the bodies. Again, it was like pulling teeth to find information on the stuff I wanted. It was the same information everywhere. It was just about him.
Yeah.
So, it was a little annoying.
I hate going to several sources and finding word for word the same information.
Same shit. And then, I found one was interesting, but it still didn't help because it was like somebody's essay on how similar he and Ted Bundy were.
Okay.
And if you, like, he's not a bad-looking guy, just like Ted Bundy wasn't a bad-looking guy. I wouldn't call either of them handsome, but other people would. So that helps. You know, he was charming, he was quiet, and he wasn't unattractive, and there we are. At least one of his victims was object raped with a stick, but only one was mentioned for that. Her name was Nikiwe Diko, and she was 24 years old. A 26-year-old victim named Amanda Thethe was known to have been in a relationship with him when her murder occurred. The 4 women who had come forward about his rapes from his teen years, because I mentioned too, there were 4 total that came out around that time and said he had raped them. They testified against him during the murder trial. When he'd confessed after his arrest for murder, he had told the officer he chose women who looked like Doris Swakamisa because she had falsely accused him of rape and caused him to go to jail.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Here's the thing. How many excuses have I now said he gave?
Uncountable.
What it comes down to is he was a shit human. His older brother did not serial kill women and rape them despite what their mother did to them. So, again, it's not an excuse.
No.
Did he have a really shitty childhood? Yeah, I think he did. I think that it had to have been really hard to grow up in South Africa during apartheid and be black. And then have and not only that, but be in an orphanage because your mother just kept booting you. That sucks. Doesn't give you a right to rape and murder people. So, yeah. Ressler and others have theorized it was the abandonment from his mother that caused the anger against women. That's okay. But also it was something a screw loose in his head. He said his first victim was taken in July 1995. Nobody knows if that's true. Nobody knows how many women he raped who didn't come forward when he was teen and younger. His trial was nearly derailed when he claimed he hadn't waived his rights and that he hadn't okayed the recording of this confession. So they did record his confession in jail where he was like, yeah, I killed all these women. So 7 months passed before a judge could, after gathering information, looking into it, ruled the recording admissible and the court case could proceed.
Good.
He was found guilty of all charges on December 4th, 1997. As they read out each charge individually, and it was 84 charges, you have been found.
Oh, God.
It took 3 hours to read the verdict.
Damn.
But how, amazing. It was pointed out in that article, Ted Bundy only ever got convicted of 3 of his murders. This guy got convicted of every single charge.
How many do they think Bundy killed?
I don't remember. But, I would say
many,
it's more no, but, are we looking at 20?
And I know that in the U.S., if you're being tried in Texas and you are guilty, you're found guilty and you're given X number of life sentences, the other states where you've also killed people will decline to prosecute because why?
Right.
It's money for nothing.
You've got death, you've got life, whatever it happens to be. Yeah. So it's not worth it. And we've talked about that before too. I get it because why use that money? That's taxpayer money. But that leaves all those families end up not having maybe the satisfaction they would to be like, yes, you are guilty of my child's murder. Because a lot of these serial killers, they list who the victims are, but many of them aren't convicted for most of those.
Right.
They get the ones that they have the most evidence for, and they're like, as long as we can nail them with this, that's great.
Did you get the article I sent you? Yeah. Okay. And everybody's going, well, that's apropos of nothing. No, that was about
BTK. His daughter. Yeah, his daughter has been very public. I think she even went on Dr. Phil. And so, but the article was that she's helping them actually possibly pinpoint more victims that hadn't been discovered yet. So that's awesome because, again, that's some closure for some families, maybe. So the next day, because it took 3 hours to read the verdict, they recessed after that, right? They were like, all right, tomorrow.
That would be an emotional,
just sitting there waiting for your loved one to come up.
To hear that name.
He was sentenced to 2,410 years with possibility of parole after 930 years.
I think they should prolong his life.
Freeze him, cryogenically. Have him be the head in the science project. Yeah. The judge wanted to give the judge was like, I would give you the death penalty if we hadn't declared it unconstitutional in 1995. Right when he was really starting his murders, it became unconstitutional. In prison, he has been treated for HIV, something his fellow country persons don't have access to. Bear in mind.
Interesting.
And therefore, he is still alive and thriving. He is still considered the worst serial killer in South Africa. South Africa.
If not.
And that's pretty, because the thing is, like, you hear about these serial killers over and over. I wish I could remember how many Bundy killed. And then when you actually read how many that are confirmed to have killed, you're like, so like 5, you know?
Yeah. Well, and then, yeah, and a lot of times they will, I don't know that I could say a lot, but sometimes the serial killer is cooperative.
Yeah.
And they will work with the police afterward or reporters or whoever, and will work to identify other. So at least there's the closure of knowing, even if there's not the closure of that they're paying for it. For your loved one's death.
But also sometimes they become so prolific in the zeitgeist and then they're not that prolific. It's not even that they haven't.
Yes.
You know, they just didn't kill that many people, but they became famous because of maybe one detail.
It's really funny because I'm reading a mystery right now that I will pass on to you when I'm done with it. And there's a lot of talk in it about serial killers. And is this a serial killer? And how do you define a serial killer? And does the definition actually make sense? And do profilers actually provide anything? And not in a bad way. It's odd because it's very entertaining. It's not like slodgy and dull, but it's very much... And the difference between male and female serial killers. It's like there are two kinds of male serial killers, but female serial killers, they're all of the same, predominantly of the same sort. And it's not a power. It's never, they said with women serial killers, it's never an issue of power.
Right.
It's almost always an issue of money.
Yeah. Women have distinctive.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also harder to catch. They tend to be cannier.
Yes.
As per all the people that I've read and
yes.
And Pete. So honestly, when he talks about what female serial killers, that's where you actually see where he seems a little bit impressed because he's like, they outsmart men. Male serial killer, everybody goes, oh, they're so smart. Like this guy, oh, he was so smart. He was always so smart. And I'm like, but he got caught.
Yeah.
And there are far more female serial killers that have never been. I mean, look how long it takes somebody who poisons their family members and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just so much harder to catch that than and as in knowing it's even happening versus some people had a stomach upset that killed him, you know, versus somebody who takes a knife or strangles you with your panties or whatever. Right. So very big. You're like, that is obviously a murder. Versus, we just didn't think anything of it. Like people lose people in their lives.
They
around
do.
Them.
Yeah, it happens.
So sources, Grisly True Crime was the YouTube video by the South African woman, Wikipedia biography and crime library.
Wow. Mine feels practically fluffy.
Fluffy.
Except being me, I have my tangents.
If I'd had, because each of her, I will say, she was entertaining, the woman, Grisly True Crime, but she meandered a lot. And I was like, listen, I'm just trying to get the details from you because you have access to more information than I do.
Yes.
Here. And then I only got through one segment of a 3-part.
Oh my God.
She had 3 videos on him because she was excited to be doing ASAP. She was like, I do American ones because that's what people are listening for. But this one was in my own backyard. But yeah, she just roamed so much. And I'm like, if I were just chilling, I would love that probably.
Yes.
I was frustrated with it because I was trying to get the details I couldn't get in other articles. And I'm like, I don't have 3 hours to listen to this.
No. And it's not something you can just have on in the background while you're doing something else. You have to pay attention.
I have to pay attention.
And take notes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would have liked to have listened to the whole thing, and she is entertaining. So I would recommend. And also, I just like accents.
So I know that most of our listeners know that we typically record 2 podcasts in a session. So this is actually the second one I wrote. The first one I wrote was depressing. So when I got to do the second one, I was like, no, I need some mayhem. I need something that's not going to make me want to go lay down in the street. So, and I get to do some scene setting. And it's like, in May of 1864, we're in the Wayback Machine. The Civil War still going on and would be for approximately another year. Don't come at me, history people. This is Jet. Start your own podcast. That's my advice. It's hard to find because I was like, what was happening in the U.S. in 1864? And it's hard to find references to anything besides the Civil War. There are a few, but the Civil War conveniently overshadows the Long Walk of the Navajo, which was basically ethnic cleansing.
Yep.
And at least 200 Native people died. That's when they passed the law putting "In God We Trust" on coins, because if you say you're a Christian, you don't have to actually act like one.
But that makes sense now, don't you think? When we're watching what's happening now, when there's persecution, like at whole new levels at the same time as the evangelical, push.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the same fucking thing.
It is. Montana became a territory. Arlington National Cemetery was established. But what I'm really getting to is, in my own strange way, Elizabeth Jane Cochran was born on May 5th in Cochran's Mill, Pennsylvania. Hint, if your last name is the same as the name of the town, you're usually doing pretty well.
Yeah. I don't know, I'm going to move to Ireland and then everybody can think I'm doing real fucking well because everything's named after me.
That's your first name, not your last name.
I know, but still, I bet there's some Lawrence shit going down.
Probably.
Because that's also Irish.
That is.
So.
Let me know.
It's all about me.
I will come visit you in the castle.
But listen, someone recently went to Ireland and I went to Shannon this and Shannon that, and I was like, I need this to stop. I can't read your update because it's weird to hear your name.
Yes.
And really, my name doesn't appear a lot of places still, even though it got common at the tail end of my being a kid, right? But I was reading it on Twitch every time she said something shit, and I was like, I can't.
I don't have that problem.
I can't.
Okay, so her father, Michael Cochran, was a well-to-do mill owner, merchant, and postmaster. He had 10 children with his first wife and 5 with his second wife. Elizabeth was born in that second group. And you would think that the family would be set because he really did have his fingers in a lot of different things. But he died unexpectedly in 1870 without a will. So back then, it was even worse than it is now. Back then, if you died without a will, your wife, if any progeny, anybody who didn't have a penis was shit out of luck because they couldn't inherit.
The money would go to your 2-year-old male.
Yes. And she was like his 13th daughter. Okay. So I don't know if there was any male progeny. The family couldn't maintain the business or the property, and they were kind of left on their own, left hanging. Her mother, who was Mary Jane Kennedy, tried remarrying, but then divorced not long after because of domestic abuse. Now just put your mind to this and think about how much abuse there had to be in 1864. No, it would have been later. It would have been 1870, we'll say. For them to grant a divorce on grounds of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
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 Elizabeth went to a state normal school to become a teacher, but could only afford 1 semester before she and her mother moved to Pittsburgh, where her 2 older brothers lived. Oh, so there were 2 boys. A state normal school, I looked it up, is just a school where you're trained to be a teacher. So, super fun fact, really this time. Because not all fun facts are fun. Elizabeth,
who's asking?
When she was younger, Elizabeth was often called Pink because she loved wearing the color so much. But when she became a teenager, she dropped the nickname so that she would appear more sophisticated. This ultimately famous woman who was nicknamed Pink. I love it. I just love that. Despite being better educated than her brothers, Elizabeth had a hard time finding work. Mm-hmm. Again, quelle surprise. When the Pittsburgh Dispatch posted an article decrying women in the workplace, the article was called, "What Are Girls Good For?" The answer is birthing children and keeping house. Elizabeth went off and penned a hard-lined letter to the editor asking what he would have women do who were trying to support their families. Because she was pointing out not every woman gets married. Some of us need to support ourselves. Some of us need to support our mothers, whatever. The editor, whose name was George Madden, knew a good thing when he saw it and hired Elizabeth to work as a reporter for the paper. She needed a pen name, so she went no further than a popular song of the day, and the writer Nellie Bly was born. So, I listened to the song. It has not aged well. Don't even look it up.
Okay.
I couldn't believe I think I listened to at least 3 or 4 verses. So, some of you are going, I've heard of Nellie Bly. And then, like most of us, you're going, why have I heard of Nellie Bly? So, she was a popular columnist who drew a lot of readers, but she was stuck, as women would be for the next bazillion years, in writing mainly women's topics. So she started with an investigative piece into women factory workers, which was, really good investigative journalism, but the factory owners complained. Of course. I wonder why. So she was moved to covering fashion, society, and gardening.
Oh, gross.
As someone who worked for a newspaper, if I had to cover those 3 topics, I would be out of work very quickly.
Especially when you were wanting to be this investigative journalist.
Exactly.
And could, and obviously did well enough that you pissed off the people being investigated.
So, frustrated, she quit the paper. First, she went to Mexico at the age of 21 and became a foreign correspondent. She wrote about the conditions of the Mexican people, and I didn't write down all the names of the politicians and who was the governor at the time, and all, because that's not germane to the larger story. She pissed off the government because she was writing about their abysmal treatment of their own people, and they threatened to arrest her. So she fled back to the U.S. and published a book, 6 Months in Mexico. Eventually, she ended up in New York City looking for a job where she could write about real topics of the day. Legend goes, and it's fairly well documented, she stormed into the office of Joseph Pulitzer, editor of New York World. So, quick tangent, he is pretty interesting in his own right. And yes, the Pulitzer Prize was named after him. Her goal was to write about the immigrant experience in America, but Pulitzer was like, I'm not feeling it. Instead, why don't you investigate Blackwell's Island? So this was a notorious New York City asylum and is currently referred to as Roosevelt Island. And we are going to spin right the fuck back to that in a few minutes. So,
all right.
I just kept getting, I was so happy to write this and then I would get mad. Apparently that is my just baseline operating right now.
MO?
Yeah, thank you. My baseline thing. So, a small spin into Blackwell's Island. It initially housed a penitentiary, which was soon followed by workhouses, a general hospital, almshouses, a hospital for incurables, and for a small time, a smallpox hospital, and the New York City Lunatic Asylum. So, workhouses and almshouses were also called poorhouses. They were where people who could not find any other way to support themselves could go and work and be sheltered and taken care of. Not well. The conditions were pretty awful. The History Channel actually comes right out and says the purpose of workhouses was to punish people for being poor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, the incurables referred to folks with chronic or severe conditions who are not likely to be cured. So, Nellie being Nellie, she had herself committed to the women's asylum under an assumed name and spent 10 days there. Now, the resulting articles exposed the asylum and later were published as a book, 10 Days in a Madhouse, which I believe one or both of my children read in college.
Okay, I could swear I watched a movie, possibly with Christina Ricci, that was based on her story.
You very well might have. And what she did was she went to a boarding house and checked in under her assumed name, and then she started acting crazy, but it wasn't, she wasn't biting people crazy. She was, I don't know who you are, and I don't remember anything, and just so, while she was in there, she documented cold baths. And you're like, well, a cold bath. No, they were forcefully administered. Like, you would be sitting there and you would have repeated buckets of ice water dumped over you, sometimes with warning, sometimes without. They reused the bath water. If you were in a tub, they were reusing the bath water. If they did change the bath water, they didn't clean the tubs. And you had to frequently share towels with patients who were ill, like had visible sores.
Like smallpox blankets.
Yes. Just absolutely filthy living conditions. When she faked her insanity, several doctors examined her. It wasn't just one. Several doctors declared her insane, one calling her positively demented. That was the name I danced under.
Yeah, right?
Like, that's pretty good. The admitting doctor was more concerned with the attractive nurse assisting him than the patient he was examining. I do want to note, as soon as she was inside, she dropped all pretense and acted completely normal, which was recorded as more symptoms of her insanity. She came to the conclusion that many of the other women being held there were also perfectly sane. The nurses were abusive and frequently beat the patients. Dangerous patients were all tied together with ropes. The patients were expected to sit on hard benches for long hours every day with nothing. There was a wall to stare at. There wasn't a window. You couldn't have a newspaper. You couldn't talk to people. You just were expected to sit on a hard bench all day, not speak, not move.
I am forever grateful that I did not live in the era of these sorts of institutions, because so many women were there just for not being complacent.
Yes.
Yeah.
And compliant. Yeah. The food was often spoiled. The water was filthy and undrinkable. And of course, rats. Yeah. So the expose pressured Blackwell's asylum and other facilities to consider more humane treatment options for patients. The story actually resulted in a grand jury investigation and a financial increase in the Department of Public Charities and Corrections. So that's right. I actually wrote, that's right, my bitches. Because apparently I think I'm famous or trendy or something. She got New York City to loosen its purse strings and put money where it needed to go, which is never,
yeah,
it's not easy. It's damn near impossible. So this is really the birth of investigative journalism. She really broke the mold there.
Too bad there are so few doing that now.
Yeah.
At this point, they're quoting bloggers. You know, like, okay, good job investigating.
Fun fact, the Washington Post quoted an article written by a cat. The column was capped by a statement, this column of humor and fabrication, it was a dead cat. It was Otis the head cat. My brother-in-law wrote this article, and we saw this. Right. It was hilarious. And Joe wrote to the Washington Post and said, you might want to check your sources because you just sourced an article by a dead cat.
Wow.
Yeah. So, okay, so I'm going to do a fun little aside about whitewashing and this little piece of New York City history. So in 1970, just because it fucking pissed me off, in 1973, the island was renamed Roosevelt Island. Why? Because Franklin D. Roosevelt was himself disabled and suffered from poliomyelitis, which struck him at the age of 39. According to Wikipedia, everything I have seen before this was like he had polio his whole life and struggled. No, this said he didn't get it until he was a grown-ass man. Anyway, renaming the island in New York is... let me start that again. Renaming the island is New York City making strides in honoring disability history.
Is it?
That's what they claim. Heaven forbid they honor the actual individuals they stuffed in there to be mistreated and abandoned. But see, they're really the good guys because they're celebrating a privileged white guy who was disabled and was the fucking president.
Right. I mean, it was very...
yeah.
Mistreated by society.
Yeah. He really knew what it was like
to
struggle. Fuckers. So I'm going to put away my soapbox. So Nellie went on to write. She didn't stop after that. She wrote about corruption in the state legislature. She wrote about predatory employment agencies and the black market for buying infants. I did not know that was a thing back then. And I can tell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So in 1889, being a well-rounded sort of a woman, Nellie picked up a wildly popular novel of the day, Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Got a wild hair, got the paper to back her, and she made the exact same trip in just 72 days, including a stop to interview the author. Like, that's badass.
Yeah.
That is badass. Now, I will say she does not hold the record for making that trip in the least amount of time.
Well, no.
But
it's been a
years. A man knocked like another 10 days off of it.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, maybe a year later. So she continued to do interviews. She tackled difficult political topics. And then at the age of 30, she married billionaire Robert Seaman. So that is spelled Seamen. I once lived on that spelling, Seaman Road.
Wow.
So when it was in Virginia Beach, so big Navy town. So we called it See the Man Road because it was just, you can only say that so many times before you want to shoot yourself.
Every time you had to give it on the phone, they were like, where now?
That's why we quickly established a pizza joint, and we would just call them and go, hey, it's MB and Ellen. And they'd be like, hey, you want a white pie? You want pepperoni? What do you want this time? They knew us. They didn't have to give our address. Anyway, she married she's 30 years old. She marries a billionaire and retires from reporting. Her husband died a few years later and left her at the helm of Ironclad Manufacturing Company and American Steel Barrel Company. So she threw herself into her new job because she's Nellie fucking Bly. She could do anything. And she actually patented several inventions that are still in use today in oil manufacturing. She also implemented a lot of reforms for workers. She made huge strides in that area, but she probably overstepped it because some of her employees scammed her and led to an eventual bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. So she went back to work as a reporter to cover World War I and eventually died from pneumonia in January of 1922 at the age of 57. I'm like, that's so young.
That's
I'm
young,
like,
yeah.
What else could she have done?
A lot.
But she did, compared to so many people, she did so much. And I'm like, I want to be Nellie Bly when I grow up. I'm already too old to be Nellie Bly. I am aware of that. But she just kicked ass. Yeah. She wanted to do something. She went out and did it.
She was like, I'm just going to go do this. Then.
Yeah, you can't do that. You're a woman. Huh, fuck you. Watch me.
I think that the movie with Christina Ricci was possibly inspired by her story, but not, I don't know that she was meant to be her. She was a journalist, but the thing is, in that movie, I think they kind of figure out who she is, and she's trapped there, and then she has somebody on the outside who knows, but they won't let them come in, and they say she's not there, and they lie, and because they don't want the information to get out. So it sounds very similar. Inspired by.
And I don't know how she finally got out.
Right. She had to have had somebody on the outside that would be like, hey.
And it might have been that she said to her editor, hey, if I'm not...
Well, but how was she getting stuff out to them from an asylum?
Well, she was only in there 10 days.
Okay, so she went in there for the 10 days, but
then she wrote the series of articles when she got out, and then it was turned into her book.
Right. So yeah, how did she get to her... How was she able to contact her editor is what I'm asking to get out.
I do not know.
I'm like, probably you have to read the book.
Probably. It's still pretty popular. So my sources were the National Women's History Museum, the Library of Congress, the National Park Service, the History Channel, and I didn't write it down, but Wikipedia, of course. Because we're just that way.
All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Oh, God, look at the time. It's
right on time.
I know. We're good.
And on that note, thank you for tuning in. Check us out on buymeacoffee.com/MM And we'll talk to you later.
We will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please like, rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.